All right, guys, we are back with another Seeing Through Gebser. Thank you guys for continuing to watch. Now, in this edition of the book, we are on page 379. Now, we're working through it. I'm proud of you boys for sticking it out. Today, we're going to start with biology. It's going to be very similar to what we did last week with math and science. Probably take 2 videos. We're going to go through 3 points. Maybe there are some connections between the 3 points in this week's video and last week's video. And those will be borne out in next week's video, too. I love you guys. Let's get right into it. First and foremost, look what came in the mail today. Finally, T.S. Eliot collected poems. Very excited to dig into this. And, of course, Paul Valery collected verse. Very, very, very excited to dig into it. I don't know when, but it'll be soon. And also, I want to start a little anti-rationalist film club. So we have 3 movies that I've seen that I think should be in the film collection. 2 of them are from Bergman. Seventh Seal, right? There you go. And then Wild Strawberries, which I wrote a banger review for during on Substack, if you guys want to go check it out. And then I just watched a movie, Calvary. Not Cavalry, Calvary, starring Brendan Gleeson. That was also a great movie. It's an anti-rationalist masterpiece. Wild Strawberries is definitely my favorite of the 3. I love that movie. And I like Seventh Seal too, but check those movies out. And check out my reviews if you want on Substack. Now, let's get into it. So, to quote Gebser, "It is of importance to observe that biology is still a young science. The need to investigate the bios, the vital realm, and the processes of life make itself felt at the moment that time erupts in the French Revolution." So you saw biology emerge as a science during the 4D mutation, which, of course, Gebser identified as that sort of precursor to the French Revolution. We're done with the rational ordering of the king. Time's up for that. And also the steam engine, the misapplied value of time, which we've covered. An occurrence which does not take place fortuitously. Biology owes its genesis primarily to Goethe, Johannes Müller, and Karl Ernst von Baer. The science of biology is an expression of the basic trend which dominates our transitional age since the turn of the 19th century. During this period, biology has a significant role. We need only recall the significance of Darwin in the 19th and the effects of vitalism in the 20th century. True, biology is very, very important. At least the past 2 centuries it has been. Darwin alone. You have to have the philosophers kind of building off his work, but I think Darwin alone was enough to change things. We're just like, wow, this mythical foundation's coming down, which I think it didn't necessarily have to be. From a historical standpoint, a romantically tinged biology was succeeded by a variety of counter-movements of a materialistic, positivistic, and mechanistic bent. Like those in physics, these attempts were superseded at the outset of our century when, in the wake of the work of H. Driesch, J. von Uexküll, and de Vries, biology began to show revolutionary tendencies not unlike those which we observed in physics. So we should expect to see some sort of transcendence of the 2D, 3D world into a 4D world. The new biology, which has both influenced and in turn been influenced by other disciplines, notably psychology and medicine, is striving toward a new attitude of consciousness, toward a new kind of realization in which the incipient effectuality of the new mutation of consciousness is being manifested. In biology, these are the 3 points. Number 1, time is being taken into account as equality. Remember number 1 in last week's video, time was being taken into account in physics. Number 2, dualism is being superseded, thus making it possible to postulate integrality. What was point number 2 in last week's video? Supersession of dualism, space-time unity. 3, the rational conception and the pre- and irrational onslaught of the discipline are being surmounted by an emergent irrational perception. What was point number 3 in last week's video? Emergence of irrationality. Beautiful. Let us confine our discussion to these 3 points, noting at the outset one important aspect which makes it especially difficult for biology as a science to find a new relationship to quote-unquote time. Viewed from the systatic mode of observation, where time is only one aspect of the a-categorical world constituent which pervades, binds, as well as undoes the categorically and systematically graspable actualities, it is obvious that biology as a science of living processes, indeed of life itself, reaches deeper into the acategorical region than physics, with its facts that can be systematically and mathematically construed. So the temporal sequencing, the temporal unfolding of biological processes is going to be sort of acausal. It's not going to follow the step-by-step chronological way of doing things. It can if you impose that projection and stick exclusively with it. But in biology, you have suddenness, you have all these different temporal unfoldings, and it kind of makes sense because the procedural unfolding of all these different species, well, yeah, it's going to be different for each species. We can't just apply the one to humans to all these other life processes. There you go. Let's see. There is, moreover, the vital moment with its magic accentuation, which, as for example in anthropological biology, invariably tends to dominate. So what we're going to find here is that, unfortunately, the magic structure has pervaded and permeated biology. And it makes sense, obviously, because magic structure is all about just life, just automatic instincts, no mythical stories, no rational concepts, just automation, instinct, emotion, and being in tune with that sort of life force. So that's very obvious a reference to the magic structure. So biology has to make that transcendence out of that into the rational and irrational. It is no accident that Goethe, a co-founder of biology, has his Faust, who gives rise to the pseudo-myth of the Faustian, restate the originary words of the Gospel of St. John into the aggressive active form. In the beginning was the deed. So deed, of course, that's experience, that's magic structure. Now, when he says the pseudo-myth of the Faustian, if you want to learn more about the Faustian myth of deed and death and how it's destroying the rationalists in our country, go read my Wild Strawberries review on Substack. Maybe I'll do a video about it. Those same energies which break forth in their societal form in the French Revolution emerge with equal vehemence in poetic and scientific form in the work of Goethe. These are the energies which had been suppressed by the denial of everything that had comprised time in all its complexity. The warning of the Baroque age had gone unheeded, and Europe had given free rein to an unchecked rationalism. In a sense, biology as a science can be seen as a rebellion against rationalism, as the specifically biological form of the eruption of time, which became more evident at the same time in the red flags, in the shrill, explosive whistle of the first steam engine. Red flags, obviously, a reference to communism. Explosive whistle of the first steam engine, in the Faustian drive for deeds and death, and the awakening consciousness of the unconscious, and in many other manifestations. So he's connecting all the new energies that brought in all that 40 stuff, he's connecting it to biology. For decades afterward, the line of questioning taken by biology is an inquiry into the forces of life, and consequently into the validity of any and all systems. Any and all systems, not just one or the other. That's mental stuff. This is why biology is superseding mere 3D mental stuff. Rationality divides, sectors, separates, isolates, and then picks one over the other. No, biology is any and all, just like integral consciousness. The magic structure, the mythical structure, the mental structure, and now the integral structure are all perpetually present and efficacious. It's not one or the other. Same thing with biology here. Any and all systems, the system of mental rational conceptualization, as well as the equally outworn ruling systems appropriate to the mental structure. There is first the theme of time in biology, which comes to the fore at the beginning of our century. De Vries' discovery of natural mutations obliterates the old thought cliché of a strictly rhythmic and evolutionary or even utilitarian and goal-oriented course of biological events. This is why Yuval Noah Harari said there is no goal in biology and there is no meaning to anything. I think that guy's kind of a moron, but nonetheless, he's hitting onto a point. So let me repeat that. De Vries' discovery of natural mutations, sudden spontaneous leaps, which is directly against the chronological, step-by-step, incremental improvement. That's the rational, mechanical, causal way. We're superseding that. Now biology, as they do remind you, things make, boom, sudden leaps, sudden mutations, kind of like mutations of consciousness. That is the way of biology. In our transformation of the Occident, we have already pointed out that there is an agreement in principle between the theory of mutation in biology and the quantum theory of physics. Both sciences have overturned our conception of time as a continuous event. Beautiful. So, in physics, of course, we already touched that. Time is now relative. Don't get too lost on that word. But it's dependent upon the positionality of the observer. It's dependent upon your speed. You know, are you sitting still on Earth or are you moving at light speed in space? What position are you at? It's not just one or the other. Or, excuse me, it's not just a continuous chronological step by step. That's out now. Think of the clock. That's a perfect example. And then, of course, as I just explained in biology, we have sudden mutations, sudden leaps, acausal. They seemingly acausal, at least. Both of these dispense with the pure, exclusive idea that time is the rational understanding. No. The fact of discontinuous, spontaneous, creative acts could no longer be denied. The quantity time took on for our consciousness a qualitative character and was transformed from an extensive, constant, and measurable magnitude into an intensive element with unpredictable actuality and effect. So, that sudden leap, emphasis on the temporal, right? Sudden is a form of temporal manifestation. And if we're transcending mere rational time, which is, as just explained, quantitative, there seems to be a quality to time, which we all know because you tell your pizza delivery driver, have a good night. So your night is temporal, and you're clearly associating that with quality. We can find that qualitative time here in biology as well, because in those sudden, emphasis on the temporal, discontinuous creative acausal leaps, there is a sudden leap in quality where new qualities emerge, manifest, and permeate. So, interesting stuff here. The first to speak of temps quality, or qualitative time, was E. Minkowski. His by the way, we're about to get into a little criticism of Gebser, because you'll see in a second. I for the life of me, I was thinking about it all day at work. I was like, man, this seems like a criticism, but he seems too smart to fall into this, but I guess he just made a mistake. E. Minkowski. His concept of temps vécu, or lived time, not only proved fruitful for neurobiology, psychiatry, and for biology in general, but was also epoch-making, not least because Minkowski himself never succumbed to vitalism. So lived time. Think of the moments. This is why I say, if you watch my other videos, that time is not this empty container that we just kind of move through. You experience the qualities. When you lose your wallet, it is not a mental abstraction or a subjective overlay that you just think, yeah, this kind of sucks. No, you experience with every emotion, instinct, and internal aspect of you, fear, dread, panic, things like this is lived time. And so we have mental, rational, quantitative time, which is a good thing. I'm not saying it's necessarily bad. It becomes necessarily bad when you employ it exclusively. We have qualitative time, and now we have lived time, which qualitative time and lived time work hand in hand. Remember, these are all separate layers of time, and we're not going to make the rationalist mistake by pitting them one against the other and choosing one over the other. Rather, the integral insight is to recognize that all these layers of time exist simultaneously, and we move through them simultaneously. All right? Now that we're conscious of this, we can channel these consciously for healthy, intellectual, or intelligent and virtuous ends. A.L. Vischer later brought together diverse investigations into the intensity character of biological time, particularly as it affects old age. Listen to this. For an aging person, the course of time is essentially different from that of a younger person. Time differs with respect to both intensity and quality for youth and old age. So we have a biological fact that time is experienced differently as an old man in terms of quality and intensity than they would be as a young man. Now, incidentally, we hear this all the time. All of our grandfathers all affirm this notion. They just don't know what they're talking about. This is now a biological fact, and we have another example of moving out of the continuous mechanical causal understanding of time. That's not possible if time is just this quantified straight line. It seems there's a certain relativity here based on time. There you go. The fact that biological research was later successful in engendering mutations in the laboratory, thus reestablishing the validity of a pseudo-causality, is of only secondary import. What is significant is that the mutations of inherited predispositions, as observed earlier, were mainly concerned with processes of increasing specialization. Now we're going to get to the criticism. As an outgrowth of the histological work of Saussure, W. Trich was able to observe that a species cannot arise via mutation. It can only be exhausted. The discovery of spontaneous duplication of cell nuclei and of biological induction by Saussure has, on the other hand, opened way for the first time for an understanding of the emergence of species where each cell forms a structured power field based upon a structure. So now we're going to get into a little criticism. So on one hand, with de Vries, he's saying de Vries' discovery of natural mutations obliterates the mechanical causal way of doing things. Okay, acceptable, right? Now he's saying that the species cannot arise via mutation. If he wants to say, now to be clear, in my opinion, this is a contradiction. Not necessarily a bad thing because we're in the 4D integral consciousness, but here's the problem. It's a contradiction that was not reconciled three-dimensionally and has not been integrated four-dimensionally. I don't think, unless he doesn't really expand on this. So I'm just kind of left there with my dick in my hand, just kind of going, what am I supposed to do with this? Which one is it? Like, rationally, it's got to be one or the other. From a 4D perspective, it has to be integrated, but I don't have the biological knowledge base to do that. So what are you doing? Why didn't you make this clear? Now, if you want to say... and this is being hyper charitable, and I'm going to retract this charitability as I just did, but maybe you could be saying de Vries' discovery of natural mutation obliterates the old thought cliche of a strictly rhythmic and evolutionary, the traditional rational mechanical causal goal-oriented understanding of incremental improvement, yada yada yada, adaptability, yada yada yada. Okay. So you could say that destroys the old way of doing things. So maybe this other guy just said, well, it's not actually a mutation. It appears like a mutation, but it's actually a structural, what does he call it? A structured power field. That's what you're actually talking about. Like, then they can kind of coexist. You're talking about the same thing, just calling it different words, I guess. If that is true, Gebser did not make that clear. That's me, I don't want to say coping, but that's me being very charitable to you and kind of doing the work for you. And even then, I have no idea if that's true. So a little bit of criticism for Gebser, which is very interesting because, I mean, I don't want to say the rest of this book is perfect or anything like that, but it's very high level, and it's very odd that he does that. So it's funny. So I asked Grok about this, and I was like, "Am I missing something, or is this a contradiction?" And even Grok was like, "Yeah, Gebser's really like great, except for this one point. There's a couple points he makes where you're like, what?" So apparently, rationally speaking, if you're going to put de Vries' natural mutation versus Saussure's not a species, the idea that a species cannot arise from a mutation, according to Grok, I don't know if this is true, de Vries won. The mutation does win out. So for whatever that's worth, if you want to look into it, if you're a biologist, that'd be interesting to hear. Actually, if you are a biologist, I'd be very interested in hearing your opinion on that, because you have far more authority than I do. But let's continue. As to the theme of time, we must not overlook the elan vital of Bergson and its influence on vitalism. We have noted elsewhere the devastating effects of the false adaptation of this concept in German biology during the early decades of this century. For Bergson, the elan vital is the quote-unquote impetus of life, the creative evolution, the tangible durée, as in duration, which is conceived of as the non-objective essence of being. Pretty cool. In biology, this concept of the elan vital is falsified into the force of life, or life force, and becomes an uncontrollable, magical, vehement quantity. So it becomes perpetuous desire, imperious will. It becomes degrading. It dissolves, rather than what Gebser seems to suggest, where the creative evolution is not destructive, it's constructive. And it's not here to completely subsume or dissolve all the other things. It's here to integrate and in turn generate. That's just my opinion. Philosophers, correct me down below. and becomes an uncontrollable, magical, vehement quantity, the nothing but vital, which breaks through and negates all other structures. There you go. It required decades for this vitalism to be overcome, and it lingers on today in the pseudo-vitalism of B. von Bertalanffy's or organismic conception. I also feel like there's a connection between this bastardization of the Elon vital, the perpetual will, of pure experience, energy, and volition that negates and destroys all the other structures. I feel like there's a connection between that and Schopenhauer's the world as will and representation. Let me know, philosophers, if you agree with that. I'd be very interested in hearing your thoughts, because that does seem to be what he describes as well, but I only have a pop understanding of that. So, all right. The erroneous integral or totality concepts, which later became slogans and degenerated into the deformities of totalitarianism after their usurpation by politics, can also be traced to vitalism. So when Carl Schmitt, the Nazi, comes out and he says that the division of the German society has gone too far and there's no possible way to unite any of this, what you do is you establish a fascist government, and the fascist government has permission or grounds to invade every aspect of the individual's life, no matter how small, to confer a unity, because according to them, it's either unity or disunity. You must choose one or the other. You can have both. Paradoxically, you can and do have both. The Elon Vital is part of that. Like, everything that gets... Remember, the Elon Vital, as bastardized, is a magic structure phenomenon, and magic structure is all about unity, and that's what you see with the Nazis. The results can be clearly recognized as those of a deficient integrality. Vitalism in Germany provided the scientific accompaniment synchronized to the hurrahs of the Wilhelmian era and later to the shouts of Hail Hitler. This was primarily a German phenomenon and never really caught on in England, France, and Switzerland. Interesting. It was necessary to return briefly to this context because one particular achievement, that of von Monaco, must be held in high esteem in the face of the vitalistic inundation in biology that followed the one-sided emphasis on the pre-rational and magic components. So when you had the vitalist, and even the bastardization of the vitalist, what you've done essentially is you're saying, hey, deficient magic structure, take over everything else. You do the same mistake the rationalists make, you just choose a different structure. Take the whole, reduce it to a part, which is deficient, and then pretend that deficient part is the whole. Take the whole human being, who's capable of automatic, pre-rational faculties, mythical, irrational, mental, rational, and irrational integral faculties, and say, no, we don't want any of that. We're going to reduce you down to the magic structure, and then what do we get? I think Deleuze and Guattari called the becoming animal strata, is that what it's called? Where we really do reduce ourselves from spiritual creatures who can carry the human spirit forward and create a world of virtue, decency, respect, communion, individual prosperity. We can do all that stuff, and we can honor the gods or God or spiritual other side and fulfill our karmic tasks. We're not doing any of that. We're actually just animals who just want to eat, sleep, and drink and whore our way to, I don't know, the next day, because that's what we do. We're just vital instincts. There's no other aspect to the human condition. It's ridiculous. When you reduce the human being to an animal, don't be surprised when the animal destroys the human being. His achievement rests in the introduction of the notion of chronogeneity, which takes into account the temporal structure of biological functions. I mean, do I even need to expand? Obviously, time is manifesting in biology, in chronogeneity. Chrono being chronological, or chronos, time. What is that? Is the temporal structure of spatial continuous events. I don't know how much more obvious it needs to be. This concept enabled the previously valid and purely spatial anchored localization of processes in the central nervous system to be intensified into a four-dimensional localization. It is important here to emphasize that for von Monaco, the temporal emergence is not to be considered merely an outgrowth of an organic fixation which emerged throughout the millennia in the ever-increasing refinement of the organs. Rather, these temporal results are considered as something which is effectual even today in their temporally concretized quality, time as a quality, inasmuch as primitive instincts and sublimated processes of thought are simultaneously manifest in the temporal spatial structure of the central nervous system. So let's talk about chronogeneity for a second. So think of it, take continuous external spatial processes. Think autism. Autism is a good example. Well, some kids, autism manifests at 3, emphasis on the temporal, whereas in other kids, autism manifests at 8, 9, 10, 5, 6, whatever the year. How is it possible that continuous external processes manifest at different times? Well, it makes complete sense when you accept all the different time forms. It could be sudden mutation. It occurs at 3, it occurs at 5. So with this knowledge, you could say, look, we know that the likelihood of autism, of suddenly and spontaneously manifesting past the age of 5, is very high if you cannot cure this by the age of 5. If you can get it between 3 to 5, we have a high chance of, by the way, I'm just making stuff up, by the way. I have no idea. This is not true at all. I'm just trying to prove a point. But if we can get to you between 3 and 5, look at the percentage. We have a 58% compared to 16 last week before we understood chronogeneity. 58% chance of actually kind of solving this. So the temporal factor is paramount. It is tantamount. It is everything. At some point, a spatial threshold is met, and then the autism, in this case, the spatial phenomenon manifests. It's generated in time, suddenly, in this case. And then, of course, it's integrated with the rest of your function. So you can say, look, it's important for kids before the age of 7 to get these tests done. It's important for kids after the age of 2 to get this test done, because if we do it before the age of 2, emphasis on the time, there's a higher likelihood of bad things happening. The point I'm trying to make here, don't get lost on the specifics. Notice how time and space are directly integrated with each other, and notice how the temporal sequencing directly affects the autism, at least in my example. But that's basically what we're doing here, chronogeneity. I mean, what more obvious example that the theme of time has erupted in biology? Von Monacal's concept of chronogeneity has been advanced most notably toward a spatio-temporal understanding of biology in a lecture by A. Portman. This lecture must be considered of programmatic value, since it will have an enduring effect on the future scientific conception of four-dimensionality, not only in biology, but in the majority of the sciences. This Portman dude is based, by the way. Portman, too, recognizes the spatio-temporal structure of all biological forms of life. Quote, "The abundance of living forms presents itself to us as an enormous and impenetrable whole. It is a riddle in all of its forms, a riddle in its perfection, and its sense of adaptation to the varied requirements of the environment, and even more puzzling in those forms in which any conceivable purpose of life seems to be exceeded. Forms which we are only able to describe in the language of our own purpose-free creativity, in the language of art. It is difficult to comprehend these forms of life with their long past of form transformations over millions of years, which are still fully present today, and in which future formations live among us in the plethora of structural potentialities preparing the next transformations." Unquote. So what is he saying? He's saying on a biological level, the past transformations that sort of created and conditioned the present moment is present. It is exactly that. It is present and efficacious. At the same time, the future formations that will be actualized or realized later on as time progresses are also present and latent within you. Is that not the exact same thing as our integration of past, present, and future psychologically, where past memories, emotions, whatever, shape our present moment, as so does our future conceptions? So let me give you an example. Let's say I'm working like a server's job, and I get off at 8. I wake up, I have a fight with my girlfriend, I'm in a bad mood. I had a fight with my girlfriend at 10 a.m., I'm in a bad mood at 4 p.m. So what's happened here? So the past, what happened 6 hours ago, is living with you. It's remaining efficacious in the present. It is the reason you're in such a bad mood. So let's say I'm in a bad mood all day, but here's the good news. I get off in 4 hours. I can go home and just kind of mind my own business, do whatever I want. Problem is, it got really busy at 8 o'clock, so now you have to stay until 9 or 10. You have a bunch of tables to serve now. Now you got a real problem because now you're already in a bad mood. You were expecting to get off at 8, and now that future expectation has been undercut. Think about what happened here. The future expectation of getting off at 8 directly affects your present moment. In my example, in the moment, it offered a reprieve where you could say, I am pissed off, but it's going to end soon. The second I learned that I have to stay another 2 hours in addition to the past frustration I held, guess what? You're going to start seeing angry Justin, a whining, pouting Justin, because my future expectations, in this case, screwed me. They were present in the moment and they screwed me. Same thing with biology. As Portman just laid out. Beautiful. We find here in the words of a natural scientist, so far as we know for the first time, a consideration of that present which encompasses the past as well as the future. I don't even know why I bother. Gebser just explains this in like one line. It's just, there you go. And thus also, quote unquote, the whole and the potentialities or incomprehensible and latent intensities. Portman defines the whole as the actual unknown, yet to be investigated. So essentially what he's saying is, when you take the whole and divide it to the rational, what they do, the rationalists, divide it to the measurable, the known, Portman is saying, I'm not an idiot like you. So all this other stuff that you can't measure neatly with your spatial systems, I'm just going to take that into account because I'm not going to pretend that because this limited mode of thought couldn't encompass it, that it doesn't exist. There you go. For him, the decisively new in biological research is, quote, the seriousness which is accorded the spontaneous activity of living forms which manifest the particular non-spatial reality of immanence. If rationality is the spatial reality of externality, then 4D consciousness and transcending takes that and combines it with qualitative immanence, non-spatial depths. So we have the space, and now we are integrating it with the non-space. We have the material, integrating it with the immaterial. This is 4D consciousness. They do not negate each other. They are complements in an integral way. All right. This non-spatial reality of immanence, this is Gebser, as expressed in biological terms, is without a doubt akin to our general concept of time intensity, or time as a quality, on which time freedom is based, and which in turn is of a spiritual kind. Beautiful. Our justification for attempting to evince this affinity above and beyond Portman's discipline of biology in our own is given in Portman's own words. Now, we're going to end with this because this is a beautiful explanation of integral consciousness. And it makes you realize that Gebser's job was a lot easier than you think it was, because he has these guys that he's pulling from where he's like, well, all I have to do is reword this and I'm good. Like, listen to this. This is Portman. Quote, it is precisely the non-dimensional, the most obscure and incomprehensible things which are today the object of exact research. Hold on, we're going to get to a longer quote. This non-dimensional, however, is archaic pre-timelessness and therefore pre-spatiality, this is Gebser, which are transformed into consciousness from mere pre-consciousness. The inclusion of the non-dimensional into the mainstream of scientific inquiry is synonymous with the recognition of the fourth dimension in the sense and the plenitude of time freedom. For time as a quality is non-dimensional. Only the spatial has dimensions, measurable aspects. That's what dimensions are. Remember, time is invisible, so it is an a-mention, which is not to say, it is a dimension insofar as is a world constituent. It's an aspect of the world that helps create it, but it is a-mention because it is without materialism. It is without material, excuse me. It is without measurability. It is immeasurable, so it is an a-mention in that sense, though it fulfills the same functions of a d-mention. We have for this reason called the fourth dimension an a-mention. And if we comprehend non-dimensionality in the sense of what we have called zero-dimensionality, and will be evident in another way that time freedom in its pre-conscious state is the immanence of which Portman speaks, the reminder of the, quote, listen to this, unique circumstances that all living beings are spontaneous active centers of action drawing on their own non-spatial depths. Listen to this again. Repeat for emphasis. Quote, the reminder of the unique circumstance that all living beings are spontaneous active centers of action drawing on their non-spatial depths. That is what we are. That is what the present moment is. We are spontaneous centers of action. We're the point of centrality, the point of convergence, where all the different consciousness structures and all the different layers of time that we live through converge, integrate, and generate all these qualities, thoughts, memories, all that stuff. Now that we're consciously aware of these things, we can live as a full human being. It's beautiful. All right. Portman makes several additional consequential and audacious remarks. Quote, all right, now we're getting into it. It appears of particular significance and implication for the future that the new research into immanence brings it once again the world of qualities into the center of our investigations after its estrangement from biological research and near oblivion, ever since Goethe and Müller. Now, of course, I don't want to interrupt this, but Goethean morphology and the example with the horse that I always give, that really is a qualitative immanence. That's what he's doing. When he can rationally understand the horse, because Goethe was a scientist. He understands science better than you do, my friend. I can promise you that. He can understand all of this from a rational perspective. Well, what he did was he complemented the rational 3D part, start with the parts and build to the whole. He said, screw that. I'm not going to render it static. I'm going to watch a horse in its natural sort of environment. Now, in this case, it'd be in movement, in time. So instead of rendering the object of reflection static and trying to build from the parts to the whole, like the rationalists do, what Goethe does, and Gebser, he said, no, let me watch the whole, let me analyze the whole in movement, in time, allowing it to unfold temporally, allowing the procedural unfolding to happen, and in doing so, you will recognize the qualitative immanence, and in this case with the horse, it would be movement. Everything about the horse is meant to embody the sort of ideal or the metaphysical idea of movement. It's brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. That's why I love Goethe. I think he's a brilliant man. The biologists themselves, this is continuing with Portman, like many even today, were of the opinion that the transformation of quality into quantitative relationships was the true object of work in the natural sciences. Repeat for emphasis. Like many even today, the biologists themselves were of the opinion that the transformation of quality into quantitative relationships was the true object of work in the natural sciences. That's rationalism. Today, a new outlook is gradually gaining acceptance. It is true that wherever we are concerned with exactness, we strive for measurement, the means of quantitative representation, and the greatest efforts continue to be applied toward the discovery of new means of measuring qualitative phenomena, specifically for events of immanence. The curve, the correlational schema as a precise formulation, measurements of extension as a manometer of what lies concealed, these are all everyday matters to the behavioral scientist. But those with greatest insight have long known that this transformation of quality into quantity does not touch the essence of the matter, and that it cannot be the aim of investigation but merely an aid to avoiding deceptions. Oh, interesting. The technique of measurement is ultimately not intended to convert immanence into quantity or to render it comprehensible as something quantitative as was earlier demanded. Rather, measurement is intended simply to assist us in achieving a more objective expression of our statements regarding this barely accessible reality of immanence, unquote. So the rational, quantitative, measurable stuff is an aid to understanding the qualitative immanence. We do not take the qualitative depths in immanence and transform them into quantities. That is rationalism. We don't do that nonsense. This is Gebser now. The new mode of observation, the regard for immanence, has not only opened anew the realm of qualities or brought about a new regard for organic formations, precisely this deeper incursion into the uniqueness of immanence has given rise to fundamental changes in our understanding of life. Actually, that was Portman, excuse me. So, we'll end it there today. Next week, we'll finish out our discussion in biology. And then after that, are we done with the natural sciences? Yeah, we're going to move on to the sciences of the mind. So, we'll get into psychology. I love you guys. Hope you guys learned something. So, of course, after next week, we finished up math, physics, biology, and I'm very excited to get into the rest of the book. You guys are the best. I love you guys so much. I hope you guys had a good Thanksgiving, by the way. And I'll see you soon. Let me know what you guys think of this stuff. I'll see you soon.